Blessed brothers and broads of the light, I praise your diligence to our holy order. Our dear brother Babsy and many others have reached out to High Lord Oklahoma to give my insights into the Lightsmith Hero talents. This request shows great wisdom. For is it not the Lightforged who already hold the power to forge light? Indeed. Ask, and you shall receive. Let's start by explaining what hero talents are for those of you that haven't kept up with the War Within news. Each class will have 3 different sets of hero talent trees, and each specialization will get to pick between 2 of them. That's the idea. And this is what they look like. We'll get down to the Paladin one here in a second. But you can see at the top here, this is called the Keystone talent. Okay, and this introduces a new mechanic or concept to the specialization. Down here, the Capstone talent basically augments and amplifies the Keystone talent. Sprinkled through the tree are other additions and talents that enhance abilities that you already have or play further into this Keystone talent. The goal of this, according to Blizzard, is to enhance what you already are. What I tend to find actually happens is that it's an enhancement of what Blizzard wants you to be. Here's a perfect example of what I'm talking about, where they've turned Resto Druids into better Resto Shamans. I mean, Shamans wished they had the type of totems that Resto Druids have. And so here you play further into the summoning of pets to help you heal, turning Resto Druids into basically the BM hunters of healing now. None of the Druids I know enjoy this. I don't enjoy this playstyle on my Druid, but if you're going to be a Keeper of the Grove, you're going to be spawning your little treant totems all over the place. The interesting thing about telling people that you're enhancing their fantasy is you better have a really good idea of what the community feels like their fantasy is. And I'm not sure that the Blizzard dev team is super tuned into that. But time will tell. Let's come down to the Paladin then. Here's the specializations that you can pick for Holy. So right away, Herald of the Sun, you know I have a problem. I don't understand where this sun worship came in. Paladins are not sun worshippers, okay? We do not worship the literal light. The light is figurative, right? It stands for righteousness, goodness. It's more in the line of light versus darkness, good versus evil. We do not actually worship sources of light. This might as well be Herald of the Light Bulb or Herald of the Fireplace. I mean, this is ridiculous. The only reason all this sun worship came in is so that they could force Horde Paladins onto us. And it's embarrassing. It's ridiculous. And I've never seen a Paladin concept in any other game where they're sun worshippers. So no, absolutely not. I am not for this sun worship thing. I don't even understand why it's allowed. I don't even understand why Horde Paladins. I mean, I'm willing to concede on the Blood Elves, but Tauren, if you can even be a Tauren Paladin, I don't know you. So this sun worship shit is already screwing with my immersion. So I'm definitely going to have to be stuck being a Lightsmith. Although, you know, ironically, this one will probably be the best talents. And so I'm going to have to be a Herald of the Sun. It just drives me crazy. And this is what I'm talking about. When you're going to go define class concepts for people, it's a double-edged sword, because the Tauren Paladins are going to love this. But for the old school cats like me, it's gross. It ruins my immersion, to be quite frank. And I'm not excited at all. So this title needs to be changed, in my opinion. But it is what it is at this point. It's coming down here into the Lightsmith, and you'll see this Keystone talent right here, Holy Armament. So the concept with the Lightsmith is then that you're a Holy Armorer. Kind of a cool concept, I think. What I'm concerned about with this whole tree is really the mechanics of it. And since I can't try it out, it kind of leaves me, to be quite frank, a little concerned. But let's talk through what it is and explain it, and then you can form your opinion and you can tell me if I'm crazy or not. So right away, you can see you will the light to manifest at a target location. So you spawn something at a target location, and you're either going to spawn a holy bulwark or a sacred weapon. And the bulwark gives a stacking shield, and the sacred weapon does what Blessing of Summer does. So I guess you're going to put out your Blessing of Summer, and then you're also going to have your sacred weapons. I mean, that's just a lot of buffing going out, which is fine. I'm not opposed to it. Right away, this sounds to me like Lightwell. Do you guys remember Lightwell? Lightwell was an ability that priests used to have, I think back in Lich King. I don't remember. But they would spawn this well on the ground and people would go click it and they'd get a heal over time. It's kind of a cool concept, but to be honest, it was hated. And the reason it was hated isn't because it's not great conceptually. It was just that mechanically it sucked to manage all of the stuff you have to do both in PvE and PvP, and then have to come click on this thing. And so the real concern here is acquisition. So you have to remember on the PvE side of things, you need add-ons to tell you about when new shit is coming, if you're standing in shit. And the whole way they increase difficulty in this game is they make a ton of shit happen and balls come up and quaking and there's just all this shit happening all the time. And now you're also supposed to look for this stuff on the ground is very concerning to me. On the PvP side, most of the DPS I play with at my skill level, hell, I mean, I have ability cooldown tracker, right? So I see my DPS die all the time, both in PvE and PvP, without using their own cooldowns. They're also now supposed to be looking out for shields and weapons spawning on the ground to pick up. I mean, this is not a new mechanic, and it's been introduced, and every time it's introduced, it's not been received well. And it's not that it's not a cool concept. It kind of is. And it's a cool way. I like shielding. I like causing people's weapons to burn or whatever and do a little bit more damage. I like to be able to do that. I like it when healers also get support abilities. To me, making support classes is a big mistake. You should just bake some support into your healers. I like that. I think it's a lot of fun. But having to pick shit off the ground has a ton of implications. Let's just slide over to the actual tree now. This is what it's going to look like. And you're going to get all of these talents. And then you'll have 3 to 4 choice nodes. Then you get all the rest of these. Now, this solidarity ability makes it so that if an ally picks it up, you also gain the benefit. And if you pick up an armament, then a nearby ally also gains its benefits. The question here, of course, is if you pick up the shield, is the shield more likely to go on the tank? Because that's how you're going to want it to apply. Or is just something that's going on in the background and it's kind of just this passive thing that happens and it's really not smart buffing. It's nothing wrong with it conceptually, but I really just think this should have been a casted like rotational buff. So you get Holy Bulwark and you can put that on someone, much like Blessing of Seasons, I guess, and then when Sacred Weapon comes up. But then again, I mean, this just seems a little redundant because we already have a rotating buff. I don't know. There's some redundancy here, and there's some mechanics that I'm concerned about. But again, I can't actually play it, so I don't know. And here's a further example of what I'm talking about. Divine Inspiration in this choice node. So you either get a 20% cooldown on this ability, and I don't know what the cooldown on Holy Armaments is going to be, but they last for 20 seconds, so that's kind of nice. Over here on Divine Inspiration side, your spells and abilities have a chance to manifest a Holy Armament. So is it just going to spawn on the ground next to you, next to them? Where? And again, people are supposed to what? Jump over and grab these armaments in the middle of mechanics in the middle. Are you going to come out from behind a pillar in PvP to get an armament only to get CC'd? I mean, I just, again, mechanically, this sounds like a disaster and it's been done. Hopefully they've thought it out and played it out. But to be fair to me, sometimes that's not the case. Valiance. So this, you consume your infusion of light procs as holy or shining light as protection, and it extends the duration of your holy armaments. So it's very similar then to your Boundless Salvation talent, which extends the duration of your Tears Deliverance on a target by healing into them. When you get your Infusion of Light procs, it's going to extend the duration of that holy armament. And that's kind of neat. I mean, it plays into an already existing mechanic, and it's kind of passively happens, which is great. It rewards the times that you get crits. If you get a lot of Infusion of Light procs, it could really ramp up a DPS's DPS or the shielding on your tank. I think that's a great concept. Now remember, the Capstone ability's whole goal is to amplify the Keystone ability. So Blessing of the Forge is our Capstone ability. It sounds like when you hit Avenging Wrath, you're going to summon a sacred weapon. And so during Wings, your sacred weapon will cast spells on your target and echo the effects of your holy power ability. So I'm assuming when you heal someone, it'll echo that healing onto them, and how much, I guess, is yet to be determined. It sounds a lot like Dancing Rune Weapon to me, where DK summon a weapon that mirrors their attacks and gives them a better defense, and they get increased parry chance while it's active. One of my concerns with this Blessing of the Forge is, depending on how powerful it is, then what happens is the entire class gets balanced around Wings again. And the biggest problem Paladins have had since their inception is no Wings, no fun. And so you kind of can run into that feeling that when you have Wings, you're just a god, and then when you don't, you're trash. And I'm not completely opposed to having classes that play like that, and I'm not completely opposed to Paladins being that class. The problem I think that I have is that every class has steroids now. Everybody has a 20% increase to haste, spell, whatever, damage, crit, and it just seems like we're all just trading the same cooldowns with different names and animations. And so to me, it's like the classes kind of all become very similar in that way. So Blessing of the Forge, I mean, I don't know what the animations look like. I don't know what the summoning looks like. And I don't know how much of a healing or DPS increase this is. So it's kind of hard to say without having that information. But we've had talents like it already. It's a cool concept. It's just I'm very concerned about the mechanics involved here. That's where my big concern lies. But I think it's a cool concept, kind of to be a holy armorer and buff up people's armor and damage with light. I think it's an awesome concept. I would totally agree with that. Over here, you pick between two rites, which imbue your weapons. So just like shamans imbue their weapons with rock or flame, now you can imbue your weapon with, on top here, 5% armor, 1% primary stat, which is just a snore fest. The bottom one, 3% stamina, and your spenders sometimes unleash a burst of healing around a target. That's cool. I mean, I think that's the one that all the holy paladins are going to pick. I do have to say it sounds a lot like Touch of Light, where your spells and abilities have a chance to cause your target to erupt in light, dealing damage or healing. I guess in this case, it just says sometimes unleash a burst of healing. I think the real question is going to be, what does sometimes mean? That proc rate, right? DKs have their forge, shamans have their imbues, and now lightsmiths will also be able to imbue weapons with buffs. It's fine. I think they're a little boring, but it's okay. We'll just stay on this side and then we'll hit the other one. So laying down arms, when your armament wears off, and again, the 20 seconds is a nice buff. I mean, that's a nice duration for a buff. So after that 20 seconds and your armament fades, you get a reduction on lay on hands, and you all know I love the 7-minute miracle. I hate that it's 7 minutes. That's my number one complaint. Every time an armament buff wears off, now you get 15 seconds off, and I'm in. I love it. And you gain Shining Light or Infusion Light, so you gain a proc. This is kind of a cool talent, I think, because what do you always hate when a buff wears off? You're like, damn, that fell off. Well, now when it falls off, you get a little something extra just to carry you until you get one again. So pretty neat. Shared Resolve, the effect of your active aura is increased by 33% on targets with your armament. But I mean, this is just awful. I mean, 33% of what is Devotion Aura? 3% damage reduction. So they get another 1% damage reduction. I guess this is pretty powerful for concentration aura if you get to add this up into the silence reduction. That's kind of nice, maybe. But I feel like auras are already so weak that they're not even that great anymore. Plus, the big problem here is that half the time I forget to turn off my Crusader aura. Oops. Divine Guidance. Now, I actually really like this idea. Hear me out. Consecrate is to paladins what Rune of Power is to mages. Either they leave it in a state where it's so weak that the only people that really consistently throw it down are the min-maxers, or they make it so powerful, or that you get some buff while you're standing in it so powerful that you have to maintain it 24/7, which is also awful gameplay. And Consecrate becomes very frustrating as an ability in a game where they've handed out movement abilities ×2 to every class in the game. Right? Everybody has 2 charges a jump, 2 charges a charge, 2 charges a dash, 2 charges a pony. It's really hard for people to sit in a Consecrate. In PvE, you can get a little more use out of it, but again, it's been historically not that strong. We'll bring in Divine Guidance, where every time you spend Holy Power, your next Consecrate stacks up. So you could stack up this Uber Consecrate, and then when you really want to bring it in and burn shit down, you drop it. I think that is a cool concept. And I hope this stacks up and makes it lethal. It would be really cool in PvE, where Holy Paladin damage is just laughable at the moment. It's had its ups and downs, but on the PvP side, it would be sweet. You're out there, you're healing your boys and everything. A rogue opens on you. You trinket out of that and drop your Consecrate, and now he's on hot ground. And he's got to hop out of it. It would be like a defensive that would help you. I don't know. I really like it conceptually. It's just the question is, are they going to let it stack up to do enough damage? And it also does some healing. So it says healing and damage, which is really an idea up to a fixed total. So it's really going to matter what that fixed total is. But I love this idea for like this stacking buff to your Consecrate as you're flowing in the light, right? You're throwing out heals, you're burning your Holy Power, and then you get that little stacking buff, and here you go. You got this awesome, powerful Consecrate that you can come in and throw down. And even if they had to increase the cooldown of Consecrate substantially, make it 20, 30 seconds, but it just make it a meaningful thing to push, I think is a great concept. And I'm excited about Divine Guidance. I'll check it out. Now, you guys know me. I love my spinning hammers the most, but I got to say the Paladin in me gets hot around the girdle when I think about a big, powerful Consecrate. So bring it on. The thing is, though, look at this Blessed Assurance. This is a really tough node for me because down here, you get the same stacking buff by spending Holy Power, but then it buffs up your next Crusader Strike, Blessed Hammer, or Hammer of the Righteous. So, and those abilities can all hit pretty well. I mean, that's going to be really big for my Melee Wings family. I think that's a pretty cool way to bake it in. So both of these talents sound like they could be really fun, and this sounds like a pretty competitive node to me. It just, of course, always depends on how they tune it and what they mean by a fixed total. But pretty exciting. I like this choice node a lot. But here's my favorite ability in the tree so far, Fear No Evil. Finally, something we get for those damn priests and warlocks that just get to fear the shit out of us and purge our 5-minute cooldown with their mass dispel. It just drives me crazy. We have no counterplay to them whatsoever. But now, here we go. Reduction of fear effects. I really like this Fear No Evil. It's a cool concept for paladins. We're brave, we're bold, we're committed in the light. We don't give a shit. We're just here to party. And you're always going to have Fear No Evil because Excoriation down here is just awful. I mean, every time you cast Hammer of Justice, everything within 5 yards, so I mean, that's nothing. Targets are slowed by 15%. I mean, what's 15% in a game with this many movement abilities? 15% isn't even that much in PvE. It's damn near worthless in PvP. I mean, it's just awful. Awful. So, Fear No Evil, I know the PvE people are like, that sucks, but for us PvPers, I can see this probably getting halved in PvP. If we're honest, this is probably going to be 25%, right? But it shouldn't be. Those damn bubble bursting bastards and their fears makes me sick. Hammer and Anvil, your judgment crits cause AoE, healing, and damage at the target's location. Awesome. I love this ability. It's very thematic. It feels great. And it really makes those big judgment crits pay off. Judgment crits already feel fantastic throwing that hate at ranged. This even makes them feel better. My only concern here is on the PvE side. Sometimes this stuff, and the guy that does it, you got to read this Wowhead article. This is from Brother Clarius. He's an EU player, just an outstanding paladin. Of course, you know I hate the Tauren paladins, but some people love them, and it is just what it is. But he does a write-up that just talks about this whole spec and his concerns with it. And honestly, I would echo almost everything he says. You got to read this. It's going to be down in the description. I've already stepped on his toes a little bit. I think a lot of us would just agree on some of the concerns. He's more of a PvE side guy. I'm more of a PvP side guy. Like, he's not real happy about Fear No Evil, where I am fucking ecstatic about it. But for the most part, I think we agree. Read what he says about the tree. You got to read it because it's an excellent write-up, and he does such a good job of explaining his concerns. And overall, I think a lot of people were kind of disappointed. Again, not because this is a bad tree. Some of this stuff is pretty neat. And like I said, it could be really cool just depending on the numbers. I think the two big concerns that I see from a lot of the information that I've looked at and just a lot of the opinions I looked at are, number one, what I talked about just mechanically, what does summoning these armaments and going and getting them look like in a game where there's already a ton of shit going on in both PvE and PvP. And then on the other side, to be fair, a lot of these abilities kind of mimic stuff that's already in the game. So there's nothing like new and exciting. It just seems like these are holy versions of abilities that are already in the game. And, which is fine. I think it could really be cool, but there's a lot of crossover now, and some people feel that there's already getting to be too much crossover between the classes. So I don't know. This is so hard to judge without actually getting to play it, but I do like the concept of being a lightsmith and enhancing your allies' armor and or weapons. I don't know why we haven't had the ability to give people flaming weapons. I think that would be an awesome ability. If it's up to me, this becomes a buff that you can just put on people that rotates, kind of like Blessing of Seasons. Blizzard always has to screw with the talents. They just could not leave the talents alone. And as much as I give them hell for it, sometimes they come up with some pretty awesome stuff. For example, Divine Toll, which is just an incredibly awesome ability, especially for protection paladins. And they've come up with some pretty cool abilities in the past. So I'm always okay with them trying stuff. I just reserve the right to not be happy about it if I'm not. But without being able to test this, it's so hard to tell. So there's your breakdown of the Lightsmith Hero talents. We'll have to see how it all plays out. I believe the beta is right around the corner for the War Within. So it won't be long before they'll get to try all this stuff out and they'll get their feedback. And I'm hoping that with the amount of effort they're putting into WoW and the consistency of the patches, that we're actually going to get some nice changes and they're really going to be able to adapt to the feedback they get. But don't worry about a thing, my Oklahoma gang, because I'm going to be there with you the whole way. Oklahoma out.